Hi, everyone, and welcome to this AI regulation and sovereignty session. Joining me today, three terrific guests: Luisella Giani from Oracle Corporation, Clark Parsons, Managing Director at the Internet Economy Foundation, and Arnaud Muller, Executive Chairman and Founder of Saagie. Welcome to all of you. I would propose to start with a short presentation of your respective activities. Luisella, maybe you can start.
Yes, good afternoon to everyone. So my name is Luisella Giani. I work in Oracle for the EMEA region. And, my role is I like to consider myself as a translator. So it means my role is to translate emerging technology into business and help, our clients into applying also artificial intelligence and other emerging technology to their priorities.
Arnaud, maybe next.
Thank you, Emanuele. So Arnaud Muller, President and Chairman of Saagie. So what I'm doing, I'm running my own business and startup, one of the 120 French tech player known in this data and AI space, so French Tech 120. I'm a data activist, I would say, and a data lover. I'm running several activities. First one is the French Tech task force around data sovereignty. I'm leading a stream with France Digital and the task force around data and analytics. And at Saagie, we are building an orchestrator for data ops, which means we are simplifying access to technologies for CIO and chief data officers, so they can leverage an ecosystem of technologies, mostly Americans and Europeans.
Clark.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Emanuele. I'm Clark Parsons, the Managing Director of the Internet Economy Foundation. As you can hear, I'm an American. Grateful we don't have to speak French today, based in Berlin. I'm running a think tank here. We actually partner a lot with France Digital on projects, as well as the German Startup Federation and other great organizations pushing for European digital sovereignty. We're about 5 years old, put out a lot of studies, and one of the key issues that we work on, we work on not only helping the startup ecosystem, but also working in Brussels on the regulatory framework. So this panel is really wonderful because it combines two of our key issues.
Thank you very much. So let me jump into the main subject here. Last February, the European Commission drafted a white paper on high-risk AI applications, namely healthcare, which is an important first attempt to define AI regulation. And at the same time, if we look at this paper, there's a certain number of difficult technical trade-offs that emerge from this paper. For example, combining the European values with AI can be problematic, like transparency versus accuracy, how we can monitor AI over time, and there are several other technical trade-offs that need to be addressed in this paper. So maybe what are your thoughts, first of all, on this complex subject and the need of AI to regulate, to be regulated in Europe? Maybe Clark, you want to start answering this question?
Sure, thank you. I mean, it's a great start, the paper. It has, for those who aren't familiar with it, I think, there's three key elements that they focused on for how to, get this ecosystem going. They talk about excellence that we need in AI. We need trust and agility. Those are sort of the three things. But I think actually the title already tells you what we see perhaps as a bit of a problem with it. Yes, you can say high risk AI sector, but actually to me, it's a high opportunity AI sector because Europe has so many great data pools. So my view in general is that the paper is a good step in the right direction, but we feel obviously as an organization that's trying to make sure the ecosystem in France, Germany, and all across Europe is prospering with AI champions. We think there's maybe a little too much focus on risk and not enough focus on opportunity and what could be done to make sure that the AI champions emerge. I'll stop there and let others comment. We can maybe go deeper into some of that, but a good first step. But in our view, I think there's still a lot more opportunity in AI that a lot of the politicians aren't seeing.
Who wants to react on this one, for example?
Yeah, I may react briefly, because I also agree on what was just told. I think also the point is trade-off, but guarantee. There are also other three areas that are related to traceability, transparency, and also human-centered. And I think those are extremely important. I mean, if we just have these three principles. So it means AI is not a black box, but we do understand what is happening, how algorithms are working, what are like the data we are using to train algorithm, also to avoid bias, and also to be sure that we are aware about what are the output that we can get from an algorithm. Then I think we should also find a better trade-off. I also would like to provide you a couple of examples, of AI used for good and for well-being. For instance, we have done a project together with Save the Children and Bot Supply that actually a chatbot was used in Denmark. So the project is called Slap That. It means raise it, kind of, where actually the problem was that children that were cyberbullied or offended online, they were too shy, to report this to a counselor, but actually they were open to report this to a chatbot and to a system. And this was extremely helpful because you had like plus 85% of report of situation that actually could be, even at early stage of an abuse. And also in this case, you need to have a governance. It means when the situation is clearly an abuse, then you have a human being that is jumping in. And, in short, a second example of AI used for good, we were running a survey soon after the first lockdown. So it was between July and August in 11 countries. And this service was done around in 2,000 between, employees and different roles in a company. People at between 22 and 70 years old. Surprise, surprise, this year, the pandemic was the most stressful, professionally speaking, for the majority of the people. So it means 85% say this is the most stressful year, and already 75% of the people found that AI was helping them in different way, either for doing some tasks that they are really standard, so supporting them in their job, but also 68% of those people told that they would prefer to speak with a chatbot about their issue related to stress and anxiety compared to speaking with their manager. So this should have us thinking about, how AI could help us also in the future, and not always considering, all the area related to privacy, data, and so on, because, I'm extremely sure that we can find a lot of application where AI is actually helping us and is not a threat.
Good. Thank you, Luisella. Arnaud, do you want to react maybe on also on this one? Regulation is not the best. Say, entrepreneurs tend to be quite reluctant to strict regulation. So what's your take on this one?
My take is to consider regulations as opportunities for Europe, especially for European players. I give you a standpoint from a technical perspective. At Saagie, we've designed a solution that is provided for the French army and major banks like BNP Paribas Paris and others. And I was trained by Oracle 20 years ago as a database administrator. And one of the key things was track and trace everything. So 20 years ago, I was trained using a white paper and certification around everything that we are dealing with when we are talking about traceability, transparency, versioning, logging, all those stuff. So if you want to manage an ecosystem of process, you need to manage the global value chain and the global system. So when it comes to technical features, I'm convinced as a tech player that we Europeans and citizens need and we will ask every single technology vendor to provide full transparency when it comes to data management. So Oracle did that, and every single player should do that tomorrow as a European players. And this is my take, and I see regulations as something that can be so at the beginning very constraining, and I truly believe that I should have more activity in Brazil, for example, or in China, because my technology will be much more mature thanks to this data sharing and the data flows instead of what's coming in when it comes to health data in Europe. And that's a shame. So what I would love to consider a European regulation, as is now defined, as opportunity to provide an extended layer of security to prove anyone and everyone that
I think the connection is not perfect.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're back. That's
okay.
Fine.
So we have the regulation, and I think we should embrace those regulation and if possible, so there's technology challenges, managers do better than what is expected by the regulator.
Okay.
Very, very important. And so maybe if I can take a specific example, when I travel in New York, because we have a Saagie incorporated in Delaware, and when I'm talking with American citizens, what they say to me as citizens is, hey, European folks, thank you for GDPR. When it comes to our personal data, we love European players.
Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, the GDPR is a good example of let's say a regulation that was perceived as maybe as a bit challenging, but at the end is becoming a global standard. So it's true that's very interesting. Let me maybe move on to the next topic I'd like to cover with you, because a lot of people are wondering, okay, but I mean, the ecosystem in Europe has been developing quite strongly, the VC-backed ecosystem. Still, we are missing some European AI champions. So maybe I will start with Arnaud, who is the entrepreneur today here. What do you think is missing to European corporates to become European champions in AI compared to other ecosystems, as you know, as you seem to be fairly familiar with the American ecosystem?
Definitely. So from my point of view, what's missing in Europe is the right to experiment a bunch of use cases, AI use cases with major institutions. So when it's come to start experimentation, tests, and you are a young startup, or a small bunch of passionate people, it can be hard to face some regulations, like when you are managing financial data with BNP Paribas. Sometimes you will have some challenges to manage the chief security information officer expectations, chief information officer expectations, because it's very sensitive data, and you need to have the help of IBM or Oracle if you want to be successful. So maybe the first step would be to have more business contracts, so paying pilots, and to have kind of experimentation rights that will provide the first contracts to those AI players. And then once done, those emerging players can have real contracts with the end and large customers, public and private. they should scale more and faster by having a simpler access to to funds and ambition to support exponential growth. And that's something really important, because if you are an AI startup or scale up in France, what VC may be interested in is flipping in the US, because you will have more funds to sustain and to support this growth. And I'm not sure we have the level of maturity when it comes to funding in Europe. So having some help here would be great. And the good news here is that we at Saagie, we have some inbound calls from US VCs interested in investing in a headquartered company in Europe, in Paris especially. So that's a good news. And so that's my
it's a sign probably the ecosystem is getting more mature, and foreign investors are more willing to actually invest in Europe. Maybe to Clark, I mean, we have also this European plan following this COVID crisis, which is coming. So what's your diagnosis regarding what we need to do better in Europe to let some European companies become AI champions?
That's a great question, and I would agree with a lot what Arnaud just said. Emanuele, you mentioned, I think you just referred to beta, right? This is the European plan to get public procurement involved, so that you buy European, so to speak. That is one of the key elements. I mean, in general, you know, we've spent the better part of a decade in Europe solving the capital problem, if you will, which has been a key problem. There was not enough VC, there was not enough capital for the startups. In many ways, at least at the seed and Series A and early phases, I won't say the problem is solved, but there is a lot more capital. Europe has done a fantastic job of growing that ecosystem. What's missing, in my view, especially in the B2B area, are customers willing to pay, frankly. You know, as you just heard, or as we see a lot, especially in German B2B startups, the first adopters, the first customers that buy and pay are usually in America. A lot of German startups actually go away for 18 months, get their first sales in the US, and then come back, because then the German customers are willing to buy from them. So in other words, we have to do a lot better job of making, of getting the startups together with those customers, those corporates that are willing to work with startups, willing to do proof of concept, willing to maybe even actually pay for the product. That means also sandboxes, as Arnaud was referring to, places to experiment. This is, I think, something that's really a weakness of the ecosystem that we have to work on, is doing this connection, because so many startups, I see survey after survey saying, actually, our problem is not capital anymore. Our problem is we can't get the corporates to understand us or to work with us quickly enough. So that's a key element. And one other final thought, I guess, or a couple real quick, exits. You know, Saagie is incorporated in Delaware. Why? Great access to capital and investors there. That actually, of course, then means they're more likely to possibly do a quick exit in the US, or at least do an IPO so that they can get more access to capital. There's actually a study in Germany that came out a year ago showing that founders that take capital from the US are, guess what, much more likely to possibly stay in the US or go to the US. So you actually have a capital-driven brain drain sometimes. Not that the capital from the US is bad, it's great. It's the thing that's been keeping the ecosystem here flourishing, but it is a systemic threat for the European ecosystem. If we want our talent to stay here, we have to get more sovereign capital here into the system. And a final thought, because I was in a discussion this morning with the German Startup Federation about this very subject. I think among a lot of the B2B or corporate customers that you might have out there, there is still a lot of confusion about use of data because of GDPR, because of other issues. I think there still needs to be a lot of clarity and explanation for a big client, a big industrial client, as to what data can they, you know, we've talked about trusted data pools or other ways to make it possible so that people aren't afraid of legal liability. But I think it's a big issue. If you want these big corporates to play with you, or someone to make their data available for an AI startup, you have to get complete clarity that it's legal or that they're safe or that they're not going to have a gigantic lawsuit because of GDPR.
Thanks, Clark. I think it's, I saw Arnaud kind of agreeing more than 100% with you. Maybe now, still on the same subject of European champions, I'd like maybe Luisella to tell us a little bit more of what Oracle is actually doing with French and European companies in the AI space.
Yeah, absolutely. Also in relation to startup, you know, I will start with a small personal note, okay? My first job back to 2006 was like launching Skype in Southern Europe. And at that time, Skype was a startup. And a few years later, I was country manager for a company that was called a Netlog. Probably you don't remember about that, but was a competitor of Facebook and was a startup. So those are like two examples of European startup, one in Estonia, Netlog was based in Belgium. And I do remember at that time, believe me, that we didn't have the ecosystem also the VC that we do have now, and we didn't have neither, you know, big companies like Oracle that were trying to build the ecosystem and support. So, you know, a small note, if you can help, I think that in 10 years, a lot is improved, you know, compared to, you know, the Skype time and the Netlog time. What we are doing, and again, I would like to share with you because maybe you don't know, because Oracle is really active with a program that is called Oracle for Startup. And for instance, we do have also one hub that is based in Paris. So there are around 10 hubs in the world. And the one in Paris, I think, is one of the most important because I think France, especially in the latest year, is investing a lot in startup. And as a result, there is a really growing ecosystem. And for instance, what we do with startup and also with the one focusing on AI, we consider them as extremely helpful also to Oracle to cover what we call the last mile, okay? As a lot of tech companies, so we do have like out-of-the-box product, but doesn't mean that we do cover everything, especially when we do have more innovation. So this is like a benefit, you know, both for Oracle and for the startup, and, you know, to support them, what we do, I mean, they have access to some free cloud, free product, they can pilot, they can test, and I think most important, I mean, back to what Clark was saying, we support them in understanding how to deal with a big corporate client. So if you do have, for instance, financial services, what are the rules? And we introduce them to them. So it's using our sales people as their salespeople, you know, to enter in some deal, some account that maybe they have a bit more challenge to enter in.
Luisella, I'm going to write you a lovely mail just after our talk because we are both interested in the cloud, Oracle Cloud, one of the major public cloud in the world, and also all the data stored in Oracle DB. So and if we can have an easy access to Oracle vendor, so I think we will, yeah, so thank you.
Super. Thank you, Luisella. So maybe as we have, say, 5 minutes to go maximum, I have a very last question for you, short question that deserves short answer. So can we have a sovereign European AI without having a sovereign cloud? Anyone who wants to pick this question?
I will do my best to provide a short answer. For me, when it's come to infrastructure, as you know, I'm an Oracle DBA, so it's mostly software infrastructure. And I truly believe that if you want to have a kind of autonomy, you need to, instead of renting your infrastructure, the one who you will build artifacts on top of, you need to have your own infrastructure. And the limitation today is that you won't find the same level of services provided for startup and corporation that the one provided by US public cloud providers, so big giants, and especially when it's come to security. That's the reality. And the user experience won't be the same. So my answer would be, we should build a kind of strong build-up of players to provide a marketplace on top of Gaia-X emerging standards.
If I could maybe throw in a thought too, I agree with what Arnaud says. I mean, I think, Gaia-X, for a long time, I used to say it seems like a solution in search of a problem, because the market is moving so quickly, and so many cloud providers in Europe and elsewhere, even Oracle, are capable of giving you the cloud you want. There's, we have a study, we sort of say there's a cloud for that. And if you want a sovereign cloud, et cetera, you can already have that. I mean, the technology can pretty much deliver most things you want. I think what everyone agrees about with the Gaia-X push is that we do need a way to have a giant pan-European interoperable way for all of these providers to plug into each other, to offer services, to offer pieces of the puzzle. So I think if Gaia-X continues in that direction, and I think Oracle is even a partner in it, then that's the right way to go. It's a way to make sure everyone can play, and no one company from Seattle, Washington can dominate in the cloud world. But if we start getting in the Airbus direction, where Europe tries to somehow build its own cloud and put out a tender for hardware, then we have problems. But I think if we try to stay at this meta level and have a way when everybody can work together, then I think we can have our sovereign cloud and eat it too, as you would say.
Good. So, I mean, I retain that the answer is yes, with some level of complexity, but still yes. Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time. I'd like to thank the audience out there, and maybe remind the audience to keep on tweeting the hashtag FranceIsAI. Thank you very much to my super guests. So Luisella, Arnaud, and Clark, thank you very much. And I'll let you enjoy the rest of the program of FranceIsAI. Back to you, Romain. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. Thank you.
Merci, Emanuele.
Merci.